Hey everybody, it's your friendly neighborhood Jerry Rasco here with you again. It's time for another Art of Spider-Man retrospective video. And today, let me tell you, make sure you're buckled up. This is a doozy. Today we are going to be looking at the Amazing Spider-Man Annual #1. Um, and it is a whopper. It is 72 pages of content. So there's a 41-page story. There are then 31 pages of other information in there, art, splashes, etc., that we'll look at, and no ads. So this is going to be a pretty long video, but I think it's going to introduce something kind of interesting because this is the first annual that we've taken a look at in this video series. Normally, if you're familiar with the video series, we take a look at issues of Amazing Spider-Man going all the way back to Amazing Fantasy #15, the first appearance of Spider-Man, where that was one story in a sort of compilation book, which would have had other stories in it. Here we have, so then we go to a regular, 20 plus page comic book coming out monthly. And here today we have this incredible 72 page annual. So an annual, as it says from the description, is a book that comes out once a year. So because of the scheduling situation and the way that the weeks fall in the year and that kind of stuff, sometimes there ends up being an extra week where if you skipped and didn't publish a book, there'd be a hole in the publication scheduling and process. So they do these annuals, and the tradition of the annual has become where it's usually it's a non-canon story, meaning it doesn't usually impact the regular ongoing story that's going from month to month. Sometimes you'll have guest artists come in and draw the annuals. They usually are larger in format, more pages, more stuff. And they're always a lot of fun. But in this case, this is the first annual from Spider-Man, and it features our regular creative team. So we have Stan Lee writing and Steve Ditko drawing the entire thing. And so, yeah, let's take a look at this and see how it kind of compares to the regular monthly Spider-Man title. So let's take a peek. So one of the things to explain here is this is a reprint. So, and in fact, this is a digital reprint. So, the other books that we've looked at in this video series are ones that I had purchased that had been scanned in 2004 to PDFs. So they're actually scans of real comic books. This, however, the annual was not part of that scan series. So I had to get this digitally, and we're going to note some differences right off the bat. Of course, for one, it's very, very clear, and the coloring is going to be exceptionally different. There are going to be a few things that they did in this reprint that you couldn't have done in the older coloring style. Gradations from one color smoothly to another, what we kind of see on Sandman's shirt here. Things like that you really couldn't do with the old 4-color printing process. That's why everything was sort of always flat colors. You don't see a lot of, the only shading you usually see is black or feathering of black lines. But we are going to start to see some of this. So that'll be a little bit different for sure. See if I can, there we go. So anyway, this is it from Amazing Spider-Man Annual #1 from 1964, and Spidey is facing the Sinister Six. This is a ongoing group of his villains that form. A lot of the time they tend to be the same sort of characters. Usually they're headlined by Doc Ock, tends to be the leader a lot. But we've seen other versions of the Sinister Six with people coming and going. But this is the first appearance of this group. So let's get into the story. So we have our traditional montage page. So, to me, this is I've talked about this before. They do this montage page that explains basically everything that sort of what you're seeing here. And so I don't understand the lack of, or the loss of, a page of storytelling. However, we do have 41 pages of story, as you can see here, so we can waste one on a neat montage splash page. So you can see here this coloring. They've done a pretty good job of maintaining the solid color scheme that you would have seen in the original. You know, maybe this color of yellow was a little toned down, or they used a different shade, but overall pretty good. This, where you have it going from purple to this sort of magenta pink gradation, again, that's something that was done in the reprint with modern computer coloring. So again, there's a few times of that. I'll point it out when I see it, where I notice it, where it's kind of a very obvious situation. But other than that, I didn't find that the reprint coloring took away a ton from the overall storytelling. Of course, I love the aged newsprint. It gives a quality, a textural quality to the art itself. But overall, again, I didn't feel like the computer coloring didn't overly impact what we're looking at today. So here we go. And then this is a creative way of kind of breaking up your montage here, where you've got, different things. You have Betty Brant and Aunt May in one piece. You've got 6 characters all put together here, and and finding a way to put them into a composition where they all fit, is never easy. So a nice piece there. And then, of course, Peter. So we'll get into the story, and I will move. You'll see there's some pages that we just won't really talk about that much. If there's nothing super interesting going on art-wise, only because we have so many pages to go through and stuff to look at. On this one, I did say that I always like the way that Steve Ditko draws the perspective and foreshortening on Dr. Octopus's arms. So there's cylindrical forms coming at you with that cylindrical wrapping, or I don't know what you'd call it, piping or whatever, segmenting. And so to draw those coming in perspective, in foreshortening, so that they're larger the closer they get to the viewer's eye and smaller further away, and using those bands or that segmenting to help really influence that. I've always been a big fan of how he has drawn these arms. Very interesting. They're always doing different things, moving around in different ways. So I really, really like the way he does that. And then in panel 2, he does a nice job here. Dr. Octopus is behind bars, but he can mentally control the arms, even though they've been somehow removed from him, even though they were supposed to be fused to him, I think. And again, we've talked about this in the past a little bit. You have a you have a slightly tilted image, a proportion, if you will, where the bars are turned, the angle of this wall is turned. It's not quite what I would technically call a Dutch angle, but I like that slight twist. There's no reason you couldn't have drawn this in a perfectly parallel and perpendicular line way, but putting that little bit of angle just makes it a more interesting page. And it's a subtle thing that, if you're an artist and you're looking to shake up and make a panel like this more visually interesting, maybe think about giving it a little bit of an angle. So we've got there. Let's see. We're going to keep moving forward. Oh, throughout this book, so we do see, just from a story perspective, the gathering of the Sinister Six. So Dr. Octopus escapes from jail and starts bringing everybody together because he's got a plan. And throughout the series, Spidey ends up sort of bumping heads, interacting with or communicating with pretty much all of the other main Marvel characters at the time, at least the people who have their own book. So the first one here is Thor. Thor breezes by, and we get an idea of Thor, the Avengers, Spider-Man, all in the same universe, even though we may not see them on a day-to-day basis. I got some stuff here. And then I like this. So Flash Thompson thinks Peter's making time with his girl kind of thing, and takes a swing at Peter, and he ducks away. Now, he just can't help himself. The body language that Steve uses, this is not how a normal person would duck away, right? With his fingertips out, because he's going to use them to balance himself if he has to. It's just his natural reaction to be Spider-Man-ish, even when he's trying not to be Spider-Man. So I really enjoyed that little touch, right? That's a storytelling element that Steve brings to the book. And then they interact with Doctor Strange in his astral form. So his spirit is out moving around the world while his body is at home. Doctor Strange is another Steve Ditko book and another character design creation. So great to see those two together in the same book. Let's see here. And then Aunt May is upset about Uncle Ben, so we get back to a little bit of the history here. So we get a little backstory. I guess the idea would be somebody might pick this up. What if this was somebody's first Spider-Man book, right? Because it's going to be a big thing. It's going to be a large book. It's going to be a special event. So maybe somebody's like, "Ooh, I'll jump in here." It says number 1, but of course they wouldn't have the background. So we give a little quick background about Spidey's story and then the death of Uncle Ben. And I really like the face and the hand here. Again, great body language of his torment to himself on why things happen and why he didn't stop the burglar when he had a chance. But taking that hand and wrapping it around a round face and feeling like it's really the two things are touching is very good. And then very subtle thing here too as well. You have the shading on the underside of the hand. So with Spider-Man, it's very hard to shade him using black shadows without blocking out all of the web design. So one of the ways you can do it, if you have a close enough, if you're far away, like this one here where his arm is over his chest, you can just sort of drop a black shadow. Same thing over here. He's got, some black shadows. That's fine. But when you're up close, you can shade in between the little blocks formed by the web design on the costume. And that's always a neat way to show some shading on Spider-Man. We'll actually see some more of that later. And then I mentioned this is very funny. So I really like Steve Ditko. Like when we think of Jack Kirby, for example, Jack Kirby is the other primary Marvel artist, from the 60s, one of the architects visually of the Marvel universe. I think Steve was right there with him, but Jack is typically credited as sort of the king, being that he worked on Fantastic Four, which was the premiere book for Marvel. But when I think of Jack Kirby, I don't think of comedy. I don't think of funny stuff. I don't think of cartoon. I think of very specific comic. It's very accurate, or not very accurate, but it's very action-packed. It's very stylized to a degree. But I never really think of him putting in gags unless it's something that's written in the story. Whereas here, so Spidey he temporarily loses his powers. Spoiler in the story. If you see Spider-Man 2 with Tobey Maguire, you get the idea. But now he grabs the flagpole and he's clinging to the flagpole, and this funny little pose of how his arms crossed and hugging it this way, and then having to figure out how he's going to get home in his Spider-Man outfit, without anybody seeing him and without falling to his death. That's some comedy. That's some cartooning comedy. That's kind of thing you might see in a Saturday or a Sunday morning comic strip. And that's something that Steve brought to the storytelling that I don't know necessarily that Jack Kirby always did. I'm not the biggest Jack Kirby scholar, but that's just not my experience in reading those early Jack Kirby comics. So I really like this. I think this is very funny. The body language sells it, the way his legs are kicking. Great. And then over here, he's trying to sneak by, and he's basically shushing the little dog that's waving or wagging his tail. So the men are talking, so he's had to walk the dog, and he's telling the dog to shush so that he can sneak by. Again, super great stuff that probably isn't in the script. The script probably says, Spider-Man enters the building and then sneaks home. And then here you go. Here's a funny little bit. Hiding behind a fence, shushing a dog so he doesn't bark and give him away to these guys. Super fun. Computer coloring. Here's another example. You wouldn't really have been able to do this probably in the original printing. This purple to blue. It doesn't work for me. I don't really care for it. Make it blue, make it pink, make it whatever. The sky, honestly, in a comic like this could be any color you want it to be, as long as it's separated from the background. So why there's this break from pink to blue? I mean, I guess like sunsets maybe, but I don't really see that, and it's not part of the story. So I get it. Maybe you don't want to do a lot of blue because Spidey has blue, but at this point you see more of the red. Just anyway, that's something that kind of bugs me a little bit that I noticed throughout. Here the pink works. Again, it feels like sunset, guy's out in the evening, stroll, walking the dog, sees his neighbor, they start talking. I'm okay with that, but I just don't like this transition of pink to blue gradient with the white in the middle. Just seems, I don't know. Let's see. Oh, and of course they find in the Fantastic Four sees Spidey and thinks he's just fooling around. Great group shot here. I've said this many times. We get caught up sometimes in this, what I keep referring to as the grid pattern, where your panels on the page are the same size, same shape, same orientation over and over and over again. And so when you have a big action or a big moment, you need a big panel. So this really is the first, I mean, technically this is the first shot where you have all 6 of them together, but I like this one. You're around the table here. Doc Ock is banging his arm to get their attention. You've got the villains all sort of chiming in. I really do. This is something you'll see in other forms of media when, books or websites or things when you're talking about the history of Spidey and the Sinister Six. So this is a great image. Really good piece here. Let me mention this as well. If you have followed these videos, I say this every time, you're going to hear some of the same things over and over. But this is a great example of a point that I've been making for weeks now. Look at the color scheme. Spidey's villains are all dressed in secondary colors and primarily green. Electro is green. Mysterio is green. Doc Ock is green. The Vulture is green. Sandman is green. Kraven's the only one different, but he is in an orangish, costume. Majority of his costume is sort of an orange color. Also a secondary color. Secondary colors are when you take your primary colors, red, yellow, blue, you mix 2 of them together, you get green, orange, purple. So your heroes are always going to be in your primary blues, reds, yellows, combination of those. Your villains typically are going to be in your secondary colors of greens, purples, oranges, etc. So very interesting here to see that, and you kind of see that theme that I've been talking about along the way. So from a visual standpoint, if you're drawing this in black and white, all the characters are going to stand out very well and very separate from each other. When you have a very limited color palette and you're using 4 colors, red, blue, yellow, and magenta to, it's not red, blue, yellow, magenta. It's, is it? RGBY? RG. So green. Red, green, blue, magenta. Anyway, you're using the 4 colors. I always get confused between RGB, which is red, green, blue, and CMYK. So it'd be cyan, magenta, yellow, black. So anyway, the point is you're mixing these inks to get, and you have a very limited combination of how you can mix yellows and blues basically to get green. So you have a whole bunch of green characters here. You have to separate them through things like, think about the coloring, like the yellow glove over Mysterio. Same thing here. Shadow that arm so they set apart. Put a shadow here to set so that doesn't blend together. Things that sometimes people forget about when you're drawing in black and white, but you need to think about because it's going to be in color. I like this Doc Ock and shadow here. where he's holding the metallic, one of his robotic arms is up over his face, casting this nice shadow down, shadow at the bottom. Just sort of emphasizes his point is troubling and going to be certainly trouble for our hero. So I do like that quite a bit. That's a nice panel there. When somebody's just talking, good way to just again bring some visual interest to the page. Well, let's see here. So we got some more stuff going on here. Again, just Peter's upset. He's lost his powers. What if he can't be Spider-Man? And now we've got Ant-Man and Wasp making a appearance again. They appear monthly in Tales to Astonish. So we're just sort of promoting that other Marvel comic here. And then on this one, I thought this was very funny. And there's good part to it and bad part to it. So Betty Brant has run into Aunt May. Aunt May is looking for Peter. She thinks maybe Betty knows where he might be. And so they're outside of the Daily Bugle. The villains know that Spider-Man has saved Betty Brant before. So they're going to kidnap Betty Brant, but they don't know who this old lady is. So they just grab them both. J. Jonah Jameson, in story-wise, wants to talk to Betty. So he opens his window thinking he's going to shout down to her. And then he sees the two ladies be abducted by the Sandman and Electro. This drawing of J. Jonah Jameson leaning out the window, the look on his face, the way his untied tie is down and then draping over the windowsill, that Dutch angle we talked about where instead of it being straight up and down, it's turned slightly. Amazing, great image. I love this picture of J. Jonah Jameson. Some great body language. This is great storytelling. You know he's seeing something that's disturbing down below. Okay? But here's your problem. He is now telling the reader what's happening. Hey, they're getting in a car. Why are they getting in that car? Who's with them? Isn't that Electro and Sandman? So there's a motto in comics that says it's better to show than to tell. And this is exactly what's happening here. You are telling the story to the reader. You're not showing them. It would have been better to show that little image of the Sandman herding the ladies into the car, and then you're showing the action as opposed to having a character tell the reader about the action. It works. It's fine. But what if the camera was up above Jonah's head? So Jonah is in the bottom of the page. We see a very close-up of the back of his head, and then you saw the car below. You could still have the same word balloon, thought bubble of, who are they getting in the car with? I swear that's Sandman and Electro. Okay. But if you flip that camera around and show it, we still understand who it is because we've seen here J. Jonah Jameson opens the window. We have the back of his head. You could do the cigar. Maybe the cigar smoke is coming up. So we're all good. We know who it is. But now down below you could see this little tiny car, and it doesn't have to be a lot of detail. It could be very small, but it could absolutely work. So that's one lesson for artists out there. When in doubt, show the action. Don't tell the action. It's a visual medium, and we want to make sure that we're showing. So something to think about. Let's see here. So they show up, and Dr. Octopus is being very nice, and he's being extremely nice to the elderly Aunt May, and she thinks he's so sweet, and, he couldn't possibly be bad. So this is a trope that goes on for years of this connection between Aunt May and, of all people, Doc Ock. Like, she doesn't seem to notice that he has these mechanical arms sticking out of his sides, or she doesn't care. So very interesting. That plays out for years and years. So I thought that was very, very funny. Let's see here. And then we get some more stuff. We have some more cameos here. We have the Fantastic Four again. We have Captain America. And nobody's going to be able to help Spider-Man rescue the two ladies. They're all busy. There's something going on. Here we see here's a cameo from the X-Men. They're training, and they're like, the Fantastic Four is looking for Spider-Man, not our problem. So Peter decides he's not at this point. He thinks he doesn't have his powers anymore, so he's got to do something. And Electro is hiding out of all places in a Stark electric plant, as in Tony Stark. That'll come into play a little bit later. We have his first battle, and he quickly realizes he does have his powers. It was a mental block. He was upset about things going on with Uncle Ben. He doubted himself, but he does have his powers. And this pose is the kind of thing that you have seen before. I guarantee it. If you're anywhere near my age, you saw this on any number of merchandise options in the 70s and 80s, from action figures to t-shirts to web shooters to you name it, Matchbox cars. This was a thing that ended up being reused on merchandise for decades. Another thing to talk about here, there's a couple examples of it where I've noticed this over the last few issues where Steve Ditko has done this a few times. I'm not going to harp on it too much, but I just want to point it out because it is it's an important thing to note if you're an artist and you want to learn from the past, who came before, which is the best thing to do. Take somebody like Steve Ditko, take somebody like Jack Kirby, take the masters, study them. It's how we learn, painting and drawing. We study the masters. These guys are the comic book masters. However, he has put the finger, it doesn't seem like much, but that finger and that toe rest right on the bottom line of the panel, right on that panel border. And it really flattens out the image. It doesn't feel like he's inside of this panel anymore. He's right at that edge, and it just, no matter how much you shade it, it still flattens it out some. It's not a huge deal. There's another one down here in this panel where his heel is touching this panel border. It's not a bad drawing. That's not the problem. And it doesn't hurt the storytelling. We can still follow what's going along. But compared to something like this one, where he's crawling up this support beam or whatever, and Electro's down here, or this one where he's flipping up and over again behind another column where he's dodging these blasts. This is happening inside of the panel. We're watching it happen. This one is great. You've got pieces overlapping coming at the reader. Very cool. There's depth, there's space, so we feel like this is closer to us than Spidey, and his arm is closer to us than his foot. The instant you do this, everything is on the exact same level, and it just really flattens it out. So never, ever put your characters' hands, feet, top of their head, never line it up exactly with that border. You either break the border and have them come on the outside, or have the border overlap them and they're behind it inside of it. It's all about that illusion of space and depth that we're trying to create for the reader. Let's see here. Oh, I said Spidey science trope. So he's dealing with a guy who is in a power plant and has power over electricity. So Spidey knows he's got to come up with something. So he gets all this wire and he ties it to himself and grounds it so that the electricity will pass through him, through the wires and down into the ground. So the trope of Spidey using his science knowledge to allow his Spider-Man powers to save the day is something that we see a lot in these early issues. It tends to drop off a little bit from here and there depending on who the writer is. Sometimes Spidey is very sciencey. Sometimes he's very not sciencey. But in these early days with Peter, and he's still in high school, but we're really emphasizing the fact that he is a science genius, so he's going to use this combination of things to solve his problems. And boom, we have this awesome splash page of Spider-Man punching out Electro. Super, super cool. I'm going to go out and say this may be the first true, what you would call splash page that we've seen in this series as we look through these Spider-Man issues. There's been a couple issues where that page 1 montage is actually part of the story. But that's almost like a title page. I don't consider it the same way as I would a splash page right here in the middle of the story. This is awesome. Again, big action needs a big panel, and you don't get any bigger than the whole page. Fantastic body language. The punch is right. The way that he's swinging his left arm through and his right arm is up. The way that Electro's head is cocked back from the blow. That nothing drives me crazier than when I read a comic book and the hero punches like this from, the way we're looking at it, from left to right, and the villain's head moves from right to left. You're going the wrong way. It makes me crazy. This is terrific. The fingers, the body language of the hands as he's trying to zap Spidey, but he's also getting punched. He's lifted his weight up off this foot, so all that weight is shifted over here, and the bend in this leg is terrific. And then there's this nice lighting technique. Again, not something we've seen a lot. You go to the next page here, we don't see it on Iron Man. We don't see it on Spidey. They saved it for a really large image, and that is this white highlight. So we know that the electricity is supposed to be super bright, so everywhere that the light would hit the front surface, they just left it white. So they've cut it and made sure that none of the ink printed on that section. Terrific highlight. I love it. This is classic, and again, like I said, maybe the first true splash page that we've seen in one of these comics to date. So Spidey moves on, and now we have our guest appearance by Iron Man, which of course, because they're at a Stark facility, Iron Man shows up too late, but he does show up. And they mention his book. Back a little cameo of the Fantastic Four. Nobody can find Spidey, so he's good. And now he's going off to his next location. So each villain has a card that says, if you beat me, you got to go to the next place to save the girls. So he goes out to the park, and it is Kraven the Hunter. We talked about this in the a couple of issues. There was one where character breaks out a bunch of it might have been Electro, breaks out a bunch of animals from the zoo, and the cats, I commented on how well Steve Ditko drew. There was I think a couple lions and a leopard, something like this. Very nice, not having the modern sort of resources, references that we have today. We could just Google, leopard, and you'll see it, and you'll have great pictures you can use. You see how the spots work and how many toes they have and all that kind of stuff. He didn't have that, so you're either pulling from a magazine or just from your imagination. But terrific images of the cat, and now we have our second splash page, and really neat composition here. You have a circular composition, so a lot of times your compositions when you're doing a page, you want to have them in different shapes or different quadrants within the page that work. There's things that we know work, again, psychologically with viewers when we look at art. One of the things that we know is the triangle. So you can have characters, when you have 3 points of interest, you can put them in a upside down triangle or a right side up triangle, and it leads the eye around, and it's very pleasing to the viewer. This one as a circle is very nice. Each component leads the eye, no matter where you start, kind of leads the eye through to the next area and then back around. So you just keep sort of looking, and you're like, oh, look at that. Here's how his hand is right on that leopard head. That's really cool. Then the paws coming through and the claws, and now the leg comes up, and oh, there's a big swing here, but he said he missed, and then up to Kraven's arm, he's got this punch is cocked back, ready to go back, and this leopard is leaping, and Spidey's grabbing him, and now back down to Spidey and back down to the arm, and you've made a big circle. Terrific composition, really nice way to show the action and keep the reader's eye moving and moving and moving around, and then you'll see all the different things as you go. You'll start to see the really nice feathering shadows and the way that he's done the line work on the fur, the little indentation here of like the spine, real nice detail. The way Spidey's twisted, very nice. The legs, and again the power of this punch. You can see the muscles, nice turn of the wrist and the hand, and then the way this one is, like I said, is cocked back and ready to swing again. Very, very nice. So fantastic splash page. I love seeing these. I've been dying to finally see these. I'm glad they're here in this issue. More good stuff with the leopards. Very cool. Oh, the backflip here is really nice. So he's, jumping around, leaps over the leopards, lands on this foot, and then leaps again to grab the card so he knows the next place to go. He doesn't have to beat Kraven. He just has to save the girls. But again, we've talked about this a few times. One of the things that Steve Ditko does very, very well is as Spidey is moving through space, he is consistent with his body language and body movements. So what I mean by that is, like in this panel here, he's flipping around. So this is Spidey's right leg. This is Spidey's left leg. It's up higher than his right leg. And his right arm is cocked back over his head. Now, as he spins out of that flip and opens up, the foot that lands first is Spidey's left leg, which is higher up in the air, which if you continue to flip backwards would be the one that hits first. And then the arm that's cocked behind him is still now behind him. And the arm that was here moving forward between his legs is still pointed out towards us to the front. So all he's done is continue the flip and uncurl, which is awesome. Then he pushes off of this foot and flips. And again, this arm is cocked back. So as he comes through, his left arm is able to reach down and grab the card from Kraven's belt. This is the foot that he pushed off on. So you have this beautiful arc of the body. Really, really nice. And now he's off and running. Excellent body continuity. It would be really easy to just make cool shots. So what I mean is, like, you could have Spidey doing an outrageous flip and put his body in all kinds of contortions where he's ducking the leopards, then have him land however you want, crouched. He could be, doing the superhero pose on one knee, whatever, and then have him flip over. We'd get it. Spidey jumps around, he flips around. That's the kind of character he is. But to be consistent to where you can track the body form and the body position from panel to panel, that is outstanding storytelling. And again, if you're studying storytelling and how to sell action, Steve Ditko has some amazing tricks like this that he is really good at that you should study. You can then put them into a more modern or more adventurous page composition if you want. It doesn't have to be this grid. But boy, just studying the body composition is fantastic. All right. Torch shows up. Human Torch shows up, finally catches up with Spidey. He's like, hey, I'm going to help you if you want. And Spidey goes, no, I'm good. Here's another coloring thing. So here's your problem. This is very clearly computer color. And they're trying to do a highlight because I'm assuming they want to separate the red form of Spidey from the red form of the Human Torch. Both have a lot of line work, so if you just color them the same color red, you can see where they might blend together. There's ways around that. There's ways to do that through line work, maybe. Having a bolder line around Spidey could help separate them, things of that nature. But what they've done is they've used the computer and gone from a pink to red and pink to red gradient, because my assumption is they said, well, what is if the Human Torch is right behind you, he's going to be generating a lot of light. He's a giant fire. So the light is going to hit the back of Spidey's head, the back of his shoulder. So what is the light version of red? Dark version of red is dark red. So the light version of red must be pink, right? If I want to make red darker, I add black. If I want to make red lighter, I add pink. But that doesn't work. Light red is not pink. light red actually starts to get into the oranges and eventually even into yellow, rather than pink. So this is a computer coloring solution to a problem that really doesn't exist and just creates kind of a bleh. It almost looks like you would swear if this was on paper instead of digital, you'd go, there wasn't enough ink. This was a printing mistake. It's not. It's just done in the computer to try to separate the two forms. And in my opinion, it just failed. So I don't like it, but it is what it is. Let's see here. So now we've got, goes to the next place and sees the X-Men, but they're not really the X-Men. They are X-Men robots. And boom, now he's going to take on Mysterio. And we have another great splash. Great movement. Again, selling a super punch. Really nice. Big fist, big arm for that foreshortening, showing how far out he's swinging it, which is great. He's busted through this two-way mirror. And we have some of the pieces here overlapping, like his hand. That's really important. When your characters are breaking through something, a wall or glass, a window, or whatever it is, you have to have some of the things that they're breaking through in front of them. Otherwise, it doesn't sell the effect that they've broken through it. It looks more like it's just a hole that they're moving through. So overlapping that, even that piece, I'd like to see more. You could have more over here, especially around the foot and stuff, small pieces around the leg where he's broken through and those pieces are still in front of him. That would be cool, but we take what we can get. So again, neat splash here, and then they're fighting through. Spidey's trying to fight through the smoke, all that kind of stuff to get him. Has to save the card. The card's on fire, but he has to know where his next place is. He uses his webbing, figures it out. Cute little joke here about Jonah talking to a spider, thinking that Spider-Man sent the spider to talk to him. Again, not much from an artistic standpoint. This is nice, though. Again, we talked about sometimes one of the best things you can do is take your action, which is J. Jonah Jameson talking to a spider in the window, put it in the background, and have something else in the foreground framing that. And maybe in this case, it's people talking about him, but it could just be people looking at him or something like that. It's nice to kind of shake that up and move your camera around, because otherwise it's always the same. Like, actually, it's done it here. Looking from, it could have been looking at Jonah from inside the same angle that we see here where he's talking to the spider, and have him notice the spider, and then in the second panel talk to it. By coming from outside the window to inside the room and then back outside of the room and looking through the door, just more interesting storytelling perspective. So now we see the Sandman, and we've got the another great splash page, good power. I really like this. Steve Ditko does a great job of transferring the weight of the figure. This foot is planted, it is turned and very low. This other foot is in the air. As this arm swings through, it looks like a very powerful punch, which is exactly what they're trying to sell here. If you had this, if you did it the other way, where instead of this foot being back and being what's pushing him forward, if you put this foot forward, now it looks like he's falling backwards as he punches, which you might want to do, right, depending on the story. But in this case, Spidey is trying to show, hey man, I'm a powerhouse too, and he's going to hit him with all of his spider strength. So he does that. I mentioned if you go back and watch the episode that we do with the first appearance of the Sandman, I really like the way that Steve uses his lines to create this image of sand and the transition. Talk to it a little bit later, but the way he uses his sort of dashed lines, even in the shading of the figure where he's not technically sand. So the thing is, he's always sand. So even the green part that looks like a shirt is just a green colored sand. But so he uses these sort of dashes and hatchy, feathery lines, even in the face and the hair and stuff, to really show that he's made up of sort of this granular material. Gives him a little texture. I really, really like that. So good splash page, great swing through, very, very cool. Let's see here. And then fighting here, I don't think I had anything. Yeah, this is just sort of the usual stuff. It's perfectly fine, nothing super exciting. I talk about it many, many times. You've probably gotten tired of hearing it if you've been watching these videos. The grid. The reason you have so much of this grid pattern is because the action pace is very fast. We want things to move and feel like it's minute to minute to minute, or second to second. Boom, 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 boom. And that's what we're getting with all of this grid panel work here. So very cool. And then we come back to some more, sort of what's happening as Spidey is heading to his next villain. I like this. This is a very nice image of Betty Brant. She's obviously worried. She knows what Dr. Octopus is all about, and Aunt May is just enjoying her tea with her little pinky out. Ridiculously silly, but this is really nice facial expression. I like the hand as she's sort of clutching her shoulder. Very, very nice stuff. Spidey goes to fight the Vulture. What is he standing on? This is just this rectangle tower sticking up out of the middle of Manhattan. I don't get it. It's not a smokestack. It's not big enough. You can see it's barely wider than his, stance. So it's not a building. What the heck is it? It makes no sense at all. I understand he has to get up high to fight the Vulture, but this could be on the top of any building you want. I don't understand. I guess it's a story contrivance, but it doesn't fit in the world. It just does. I don't get it. So, okay. And the whole premise of the concession is the Vulture won't fight him and tell him where he has to go next unless he takes off his web shooters. So Spidey takes off his web shooters, and now the Vulture's trying to knock him off whatever this thing is to have him splatter on the ground. But of course, Spidey can stick to stuff, so he does, yes, he uses his web, but he doesn't need his web. Let's see here. Oh, yeah. So, neat stuff. Nice twisting figure here. I really like that. So he's tied, Vulture's tied a rope to his foot, and now he's going to sort of do the other thing. He's going to take it off and then tie the rope to the Vulture so the Vulture can't let him go. But really nice twist of the figure, which is hard to do. Once you learn how to draw a figure, drawing it twisted in contortions is really the step of a master, right? Once you master that human form, you can put it into whatever position you want. But getting to that point is not easy, and this is a very nice one. And then this one here, I really like this panel composition. So you have the Vulture, and unlike other winged characters, so you think of like Angel from X-Men or Hawkman or whatever character you think of, most of them, their wings are on their back. The wings protrude from their back. Here, the Vulture's wings are part of his arms, so he has to twist and flap his arms to fly. And so you've got this really neat curved form of him above, where he's flapping his arms in the panel. And then below, you have Spidey curved sort of in an opposite direction. And then the way that the rope here twists and turns is very, very nice and fills in the rest. So I thought this was a really nice composition. Again, one of those things where the imagery and having it twist around and how it moves through and overlaps each other moves the reader's eye through the entire panel. You don't just look at Spidey's face or the Vulture's head. You move through the whole panel. So really, really nice work there. I like that a lot. And then we get to the splash page, and the splash page is perfectly good. I will mention again, Steve Ditko draws incredibly neat faces, very cartoony, very illustrative. Again, the sort of thing you might see in a Sunday newspaper strip, or maybe like I guess illustrative. I was gonna think of like the New York. I can't think of it now, but there's a lot of old magazines that would have illustrated covers. The New Yorker, I think, is what I'm thinking of. Stuff like that. You could see the way he draws him old, right? So there's a lot of those lines that settle in as you get older. He has bags under his eyes. His ears are much larger because of his age. So he's really, really good at those kind of facial characteristics and making the characters unique. Now, here's the piece that the thing I took away from this whole panel, this whole page. Great splash, really neat action, very cool. This city's crazy. What is this city? This isn't New York. I've never seen buildings like this. This is like some future crazy Jack Kirby, New Gods kind of stuff. Like, what kind of building has angles like this and stuff and roof line this way? And I don't know what. Usually his cityscapes are very simple. A lot of just rectangles, windows, stuff that is enough to just make you say, yeah, it's a city. Like some of the stuff in the back here, very traditional. You go, okay, I get it. That's just, yeah, that's a city. That's cool. This stuff down here is crazy and weird, and it doesn't exist. I know that. But why all of a sudden draw this crazy city is beyond me. But there we go. So very interesting. And we'll keep on moving on. Let's see. And now we're at the final boss, if you will, right? As it's Doc Ock, and he thinks he gets the drop on Spidey using his mentally controlled arms remotely. Again, nice big panel here, big action, big panel. So the arms have gone ahead and grabbed him, even though he had his spider sense warned him it wasn't fast enough. I would be okay seeing this larger. I say it all the time. Larger image of Spidey in the foreground being grabbed from behind, I think would be all right. But this certainly, works as well. We get the gist. I liked bouncing Spidey here, just on like 2 or 3 fingers, just bouncing away. I think that's pretty neat. Again, every person moves differently. So Dr. Octopus, when he's not using his arms to move, is very solid, very stoic. Spidey bounces, twists, turns. He's horizontal, he's vertical, he's upside down. All that stuff is neat. The way that Steve, not only does he differentiate his faces, but he differentiates his figures in the way that they move. Oh, and I said this as well. This is a nice punch. Again, good reaction. So, as I just mentioned earlier, if somebody is punched, you can see this in boxing, you can see it in MMA, you can see it in martial arts, you can even see it in professional wrestling when they sell a hit, even if they don't really hit the guy. If a fist is going to come in from this side, your head isn't going to turn this way after you get hit. The fist comes in and the head turns. And it's that action and reaction. And that's what we see here, again, with Doc Ock getting whopped backwards pretty significantly. I like that a lot. It's a detail that sometimes gets lost today. You'll see, we're so used to superheroes punching each other, and that maybe Doc Ock doesn't sell that punch as much as I would like. But here, this is great. Alrighty, so now Doc Ock is leading him to the big trap. which is a big water tank because he's Dr. Octopus. So he's going to put him underwater, put on scuba gear, and then fight him underwater. So I understand the pun that he is Dr. Octopus because he has 8 limbs. But it's not like he can't breathe underwater. He isn't an actual octopus. He's really no better off than Spider-Man. If you pull off that scuba mask, he's going to drown as easily as anybody else. Why make this your final trap? Silly, so silly. But wonderful splash page. I mean, it's creative. I'll give Stan that. It's a creative way to come up with a final fight. You know, how am I going to have Dr. Octopus fight Spider-Man in a way nobody's ever seen before? Well, his name's Dr. Octopus. What if he's in the water? So I like the way that he draws the ripples on the surface as Doc Ock is diving in. There's all the bubbles, and then you see a few bubbles from Spidey and the sort of swooshing lines from where the arms are moving, and Spidey's leg is moving through the water. Those are simple methods to help somebody understand that this is underwater. This is one where I do like the coloring, and this probably is something that has to do with, you know, being able to do it on a computer. Might have been more difficult to do this in the original printing, and that is to desaturate the colors to make everything sort of bluish. Even Dr. Octopus's skin is kind of bluish, but you get into this, you turn Spidey's red more magenta and the blue a lighter color. In essence, we are looking through the water. We're looking almost like, you know, through the glass, watching this like it's in a giant aquarium. So I like, that's a good choice. And this is one where I think it is aided by the computer color. And then they screw it up. Why they made this choice of changing Spidey from being, it's still the magenta red, but they changed the blue from a blue to a red. I don't understand. You're color shifting because the water is blue, but you've changed the blue parts of his costume to a red. I get it. It helps it stand out from the blue behind him. I guess the idea here is you're worried that this blue is going to blend in with this blue. But again, now, if you're going to recolor this in computer coloring, drop the blue watercolor 2 degrees and make it just a slightly darker blue than the blue of his costume, or vice versa. Make his costume is a bright blue. You could still tone it down from this bright blue and not have it be this baby blue. That's possible. So I don't know, just an interesting and in my opinion poor choice in that aspect. I still like the way that Steve is drawing the water. Again, the swishes as somebody's moving through. The way Spidey breaks the surface here is really nice. It's hard to draw that. And again, it gives us the impression that we're on the outside looking like at an aquarium. We can see the top and the bottom of the water line. And here he's, you know, flashing up and then diving back down through. Very, very cool. So I thought the elements there really sell the water. Again, more good body twisting. I really like that, and we see that kind of throughout this this fight. So I think that's really good. And then we finish up, and then so that's it. He's captured the villains. He's saved the ladies, and of all the things, Aunt May is afraid of Spider-Man. He's horrible. He's not nearly as nice as that Dr. Octopus. He's such a nice man. So, funny joke, right? She likes the villain and is afraid of the hero, who's, of course, her own nephew. So, funny stuff. And then Peter has to go change, and he shows up as Peter. Now, we wrap this up with a lot of, just sort of talking about what's going on, and um, the idea that Aunt May is, of all the things, right? Peter's always worried that Aunt May is going to die. If anything bad ever happens to Aunt May, she's going to drop dead of a heart attack right away. And oh my goodness. And here she's more concerned that she missed her favorite TV show than the fact that she was kidnapped. I mean, it's a funny little gag. But what I said is that what I didn't like is that so many of these panels are the same thing of what I would call a mid shot. Mid shot meaning that you don't see the full figures. You do in one panel here, but in the rest of these panels, everybody's cut off either sort of at the shoulder or right below the shoulder, sort of mid chest. You see it here, 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 here. You got this close up, and Aunt May's cut off mid chest, J. Jonah Jameson mid chest. This is a long shot, which you would use to establish all this is a different scene with all the criminals in prison. Perfectly good for that, especially when you have a lot of figures. That's great. But this could have had some more variety. There's too many mid shots for my taste. There's no reason we couldn't have seen, them talking, again, full figure. And this is part of the problem when you get into the grids. Your panels are only a few inches in size. Somewhere around the 5 by 5 ish. So 5 inches by 5 inches space. So hard to draw 3 full figures. So maybe, once he swings in, maybe you're combining some panels into, one, or we're doing, this panel here, and then maybe we do one wider panel, or you do one tall panel here and a couple here and here. There's ways to vary it up in such a way that it would be more visually interesting. This becomes very monotonous to the eye. So just a difference probably between 1964 storytelling and 2025 storytelling, which is fine. Just my personal preference. So there we go. So that's the story. So that's how we've got, the end of the story. And as you can tell, like pretty much before the story would have started, all these villains had been defeated. They were in jail, or they had been captured, or whatever. Kraven had been sent back to Africa or wherever he's from, Russia or wherever he's from. And so all these guys get kind of brought together for this story. And at the end, it's all wrapped up and they're all back in jail. So when we go back to the next issue, it's status quo. And that's the beauty of the annual. Typically, you don't have things that they don't really have long lasting repercussions. It tends to very often just be this one and done story. So now, here comes the rest of it. So like I said, buckle up. This is a long one. We're going to go through this fairly fast. There are a bunch of pinups of all the villains that Spidey has fought up to this point in the comics. And then there's some stuff after that, and we'll go through that even faster. But first we have the burglar, and the burglar is the man who killed Uncle Ben. And I think this is terrific. It shows the scene at the end of Amazing Fantasy 15 where he's cornered by Spider-Man, and he is literally against the wall. That hand is against the wall. His foot is up against the wall. The gun is shaking. The only thing I think that would have been cooler is, so the light is in front of him casting a shadow back on the wall. It would be cool to have maybe a Spider-Man shadow sort of overlapping him as well. Spidey is menacing him and coming after him, knowing that he's the man that killed Uncle Ben. So great pose, great shot, really nice use of the space to have, some copy here to tell folks about who this guy is, but terrific. And also great unique face again. Steve, awesome job with his unique faces. Yeah, here we go. The Chameleon, the first villain Spidey faced, and the only thing I had to say was those masks I find really gross. There's something about once he takes them off and it's all floppy and the features get stretched out, like here where the eyes are sagging down and stuff. It just looks gross to me, which I guess is good. But the chameleon, the master of disguise, has got all these masks, and man, that's gross looking. So, all right, not bad. Vulture, very cool. Nice swoop of the wings, as I said. Again, you have that idea that as opposed to an angel type figure or the angel from the X-Men or Hawkman, where the wings are on the back, the wings are on his arms. So you can do this kind of neat stuff by just it's a fairly normal superhero or comic book pose, but then you just extend it out with those cool wings. Great brushwork too. I like the dark blobs on the underside shadow of the wings there. Very, very cool. Again, kind of crazy city stuff. Don't know where the city stuff is coming from. And then over here we have the Tinkerer, which was in Spider-Man #2. Again, he's an alien that wears a mask. Terrific, unique, crazy character. Like, this guy could be from EC Comics. Like, this guy could be straight out of a horror comic book, House of Mystery or things like that. Take away the sci-fi and the aliens and put a hatchet in his hand, and he looks right at home with one of those kind of books. So very neat. And yeah, kind of interesting. Dr. Octopus, I mentioned how much I really like the arms, and again, his arms are always kind of doing different things, and it's a great simple way where you can have the figure just standing plainly, but the arms create that that sense of depth by coming towards us or going behind the Doc Ock or whatever. Very neat way of creating movement and motion, but just even when you're still having a static figure. Very, very neat stuff. And yeah, up to this time, still really considered kind of, Spider-Man's arch rival. He's the guy that formed the Sinister Six. He's been probably the villain in more issues of Spidey so far than anybody else. They seem to have a real animosity. And that's going to continue for a little while longer. Sandman, I mentioned how much I liked how Steve Ditko uses that line weight, the hatchy line. So instead of just straight lines with maybe some feathering on it or just solid shadows, there's all this sort of dashes, which help to transition from what's supposed to look human, but even still is made of sand. So it's a granular texture, but looks human, into the yellow sand that he makes himself. So very cool there. Great line work. I'm happy anytime I see Steve Ditko Sandman. Cool stuff. Doctor Doom, it's okay. Not a character obviously much more well known with Jack Kirby and the Fantastic Four. Maybe not my favorite rendition of Doctor Doom, but serviceable. Again, for a character that Steve Ditko is not known for drawing, that is a perfectly good Doctor Doom. The Lizard, weird in that I like the stepping. The motion is good. The walk here with the leg bent down and then the foot down and the other foot up, very nice. It gives you a real sense of weight, like he's really moving through, and one arm forward and the other arm sort of supporting himself, or holding the back of this, I'll say, crocodile. Very cool. The only thing I thought was the face was weird. The eyes seem off kilter, and I don't know if that's because one is just slightly bigger than the other, and that makes the pupils look off. But the thing I mentioned in my notes was it looks like it's wearing a bad mask. Like, it looks like the kind of mask you would have seen in like the 1980s, like a TV movie, and it's supposed to be an alien, and the guy's talking and the mouth just kind of goes, oh, because it's glued to his chin, but it doesn't really move, like a mouth would. That's what that face reminds me of. Obviously, throughout the years, there have been a lot of other artists that have done their take on the Lizard. Steve created it, so it's his character, but there are definitely some other artists that I think I prefer their rendition. But body language, the movement, the stepping and walking forward, very, very nice stuff. Face, kind of weird. The living brain, this robot, which is a weird robot design. Again, it's okay. I think what you see here is like with the robot, with Doctor Doom, with like the Tinkerer and trying to do the machinery and stuff in the background and things. Um, Steve Ditko does a good job. It's serviceable. Like you go, okay, I get it. This looks like some sort of, I guess, looks more like a 1950s idea of a robot than a late or mid 60s idea of a robot, I think. But I think he's just one of those guys where he's just more comfortable with organic, natural forms. You see just the way he draws the body, the way he draws animals, the way he drew the leopards, the way we've seen him draw, the lion, gorillas, stuff like that in the Craven issue. The way he draws, just people moving through space seems to be more comfortable when it comes to technology. It doesn't seem like that's his strong suit. And not everybody is. Some people are really good at drawing tech, making up sci-fi tech stuff for comics. Other people, not so much. On the flip side, there are people who are, can't draw human beings, can't draw that figure. The soft forms and lines seem to get away from them, but when they put together their head together and they do math of robots and stuff, makes all the sense in the world. So anyway, that's the living brain. Again, all right, not my favorite. Electro's great here. Again, we talked about it if you watch the Electro episode where he makes his first appearance. Such a really cool design. I know it seems a little hokey by today's standards where he's got like the lightning bolt mask and lightning bolts coming out in kind of all directions. A little weird, I'll give you that. But I really like the way the lightning bolts travel down the leg and become the boot. The way the gloves sort of wrinkle around the wrist. They're not just skin tight. They fit on like gloves that he pulls on, and you can even see the seams. And then this nice electric bolt motif coming off of that is kind of cool. And then when you have something like this where he swoops his arm because he's throwing that lightning bolt at the reader, I think that's a really, really cool design. So Electro's just one that I think when the mask is toned down just a little bit, becomes just a super, super neat design and something that in its own way still kind of holds up. I really like it. The Enforcers and the Big Man from Spider-Man number 10. Okay. Again, figures just sort of standing there. Nothing great other than Steve Ditko doing his best and making these guys unique. The cowboy here, my Montana, has a very different face than the little guy Fancy Dan. And of course, Ox has this big wide face as he's a big, strong guy. Very cool. I think we could have seen a more dynamic pinup for these characters. Even though you have 4 of them, there's still a way to put them into more action maybe. But so be it. Mysterio, okay, again, not my favorite Mysterio. I really like the line work on the Smoke. That sort of dashy, swirly. Again, talking about organics. This organic shape just is so pretty, so nice. The way it flows and ebbs and moves around compared to, like I said, like the robot there. This just looks natural and comfortable, and you can tell that this is what Steve does. One of the things I don't necessarily like so much about it is somewhere in here the hatching got away from him. So what I mean is this glass bowl, he's trying to do a highlight on the top and a shadow on the glass, but he's using these hatch lines in kind of all sort of directions, and it almost looks like cracks as opposed to looking like a shadow. So when you have something smooth like glass or metal, typically you don't have you wouldn't use hatching because there's no texture to it. It's smooth. So you want your shadows or your highlights to be smooth, solid shapes. And then the costume here is supposed to be like the arm, where it's squares. It's almost like a quilted costume of squares. And he's gone ahead and cross-hatched the heck out of it in multiple directions in this weird sort of diamond pattern, but that's not typically how Mysterio's drawn. Let me go back real fast. Bear with me, because there is a good example of this when we find. So, see, this is what Mysterio's costume does look like. It's, again, like a quilted square type of pattern, but in this pinup, it's this very weird hatching. So, smoke is great. A little bit of Mysterio could be a little better, but overall, I really love the smoke. The vapor smoke stuff is very, very cool. Green Goblin. I like this. This is terrific. Again, still funky city. Some sort of future city. I don't know what is going on. And he's on his original, I guess, atomic broomstick or rocket broomstick, as opposed to the Goblin glider that we all know and love. But terrific pose. Just a great character. You've got the swirl of the hat and the way that he has this bag that he wears across, and it sort of moves with him. The twist of the arm, right? It could have very easily had the arm twisted. I'm trying to get on camera, just this way, but to turn it all the way back like that is pretty cool. And what a cool design, right? I mean, obviously, probably right up there with Spider-Man himself as one of Steve Ditko's most famous designs of this Green Goblin character. Very, very cool picture. Absolutely love it. And of course, as we know, I mean, Green Goblin is always the best. Craven, very static pose here. To be honest, a little boring, especially for a guy who's supposed to be super strong and a hunter. Could have very easily had him, maybe perched in a tree would have been cool. Like he's gonna drop down on a prey or something like that would have been neat. If you're gonna do a whole cityscape below the Green Goblin, and we can do, a whole swamp type thing with lizards and stuff for the lizard, I feel like putting Craven maybe on a jungle tree branch wouldn't have been that hard. But this is pretty sure, this is the last one, so maybe it was just a matter of time. Maybe just needed to find some time. But there's Craven. Perfectly serviceable drawing of Craven, just not super exciting. And then again, we're going to go through this even faster. So bear with me. If you've gotten this far, God bless you. You are a real trooper. You're a true fan. I appreciate you. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong screen. I appreciate you doing that and sticking with me all the way through the end. We have a little bit more to go. And some of this stuff is kind of neat. There's not as much, again, from an art standpoint than the story point that they're trying to do. So I'm going to go through this fairly fast. We have a quick, brief explanation of how he got his powers through the irradiated spider, that he's very strong, even though he's not as strong as these guys. He also is still a teenager. Thing I like, and I've talked about this before, is I like the way that Steve Ditko draws Spider-Man sticking to things. He's not rock climbing. He doesn't have suction cups on the palms of his hands where he has to climb like this. He could just touch his fingertips or just his toe tips. And that's what he's doing here in this as he's climbing up the side of the building. It's just the tips of his toes and his fingers are enough to support his body. And that's a really neat thing because, we don't see it as often as I would like. They don't use that power sometimes as versatile as versatile as it could be. Spidey can snag stuff out of the air, just by touching it, and then it's stuck to his hand. I mean, there's some really cool things you could do with that. And we see it here, how he can go to all sorts of different positions, support himself standing upside down, even out vertically from a ceiling, etc. And then this is really nice, this balance where he's showing how good that is on a, on his cable, on his web or whatever. But that's a really great pose. Again, especially if you don't have reference. Today you could look up, gymnast one hand handstand on Google, and you'd have a really neat pose of how that would work. But look at the twist of the hand, right? Because he's balancing. So that's his thumb, and his arm is twisted, which is really, really cool. And the way the head is thrown back to counterbalance the feet, which are forward. I mean, it looks like he used a real photo of somebody balancing on one hand. That looks so cool. So really, really neat. And then, of course, you have this montage, right, of, Spidey jumping around, which is perfectly fine. We've seen it in a few issues where he's done this kind of thing. Interesting to talk about the web shooters and how the web shooters work, and talked about how I like the level of detail into the mechanics and the functionality of how this would work by Steve is very interesting. That it's, there's this, the way the band wraps around. So the web cartridges are square. So there's going to be an element of sort of a squareness, like a watch band almost, in the way that it wraps around his wrist. And then you have this little nozzle coming out, and then the way the button works, real small attention to details, but very, very cool stuff. And then, of course, shows here how his webbing can do anything he needs it to do. If it needs to be fireproof, it's fireproof. If he needs to make it a shield, it's bulletproof. If he could use it as a parachute, as a raft, as skis, like he could literally, the web could do anything he needs it to do. So very cool. And then it talks about his spider sense a little bit, and they mention here how, the symbols. So when he gets the tingling around his head, that means his spider sense is going. When he's Peter and his face is half Spider-Man, that means Peter is experiencing the spider sense. And then they talk about the goggles and the eyes. We've mentioned that in the past, like with the Mysterio episode, how they're sort of like little two-way mirrors. It says plastic. And then over here we get this pinup of Spidey. Really nice pose. I like the pose where he's hanging upside down, crawling through the building, again, on his fingers and toes. Very neat. The thing I didn't like about it was there's something wrong with the webbing. The webbing pattern somewhere along the line turns, and I don't know why. It's very weird. So it's backwards. I think it's backwards on the arm. I mean, it should be facing down. The scallops face, I guess, when I say face, the points would be going down, right? But here it's back. I guess he draws it different ways in different angles. But in my mind, it should be going. I'm trying to think now. If I draw Spider-Man, no, it would be going up. It would be going like this, but then it flips. I'm very confused now. I'd actually have to draw it out. How's the web? And his face goes like that, and then it goes. No, it goes that way. Somewhere along the line, it gets twisted. It's twisted in these arms. Like the boots are right. So yeah, so the little dots face up, which is right here, correct here, but wrong once it gets to the shoulder. So there's something weird about it that I couldn't put my fingers on. And it's right, it's correct across the belt. So I don't know. There's something not right about that webbing. And then the last thing we have here is some of the what do you call it? Supporting cast. J. Jonah Jameson, Betty Brant, the kids at school, Peter's house, and Aunt May. He's had interactions with the Fantastic Four and the Hulk. And then there's this piece here where they talk about how it's made. And it's this funny little joke, basically, that like Stan Lee is crazy. He comes up with ridiculous ideas, sends them over to Steve Ditko all hours of the day and night, and then Steve has to try to make sense of it. And I like this pencil. I don't know if it's supposed to be this way, but you see it says 4H, which is a type of pencil. That means that's reflective of how hard the lead is, and the harder the lead, the lighter it is. The softer the lead, the darker the shade. So he's using a hard lead pencil, which is fine. But it looks like it's been chewed to this tiny little nub. Like it looks like it's been chewed, which I thought was very, very funny. And then, he's trying to draw, and Stan keeps interrupting him, and he goes through all the stuff, and he goes through the pattern, and, manages to finally, poor Steve has to stay up all night, overnight, just drawing. And then Stan wakes up in the night and goes, I got another idea. So anyway, very funny little bit here at the end. And that is the end of the annual. So, man, it's that was a doozy. Like I said, that was a big one. We knew it was going to be. But that's the first Amazing Spider-Man annual. And I think it started a lot of, that tradition of your annuals being, a one-off story. Interesting. Opportunity to bring in guest stars, to bring in a bunch of different villains, which is really cool. Group them up a little bit. You're getting a lot for your money, especially back in the day, when it was comics were cheap. But to get 72 pages, that's big. Even today, when we think of comics, my own comic I made, the second issue is 40 pages, and drawing 40 pages is a lot. It's a lot of work. Pages can be anywhere from 8 to 10 hours of work time to draw an individual page, and 72 pages, no advertisements either. It's all content. That's a lot of work. So really interesting, and some things that we hadn't seen before, some stuff that we were continuing to see as themes. So very exciting there. Really cool stuff to take a look at. Next week, we will get back to the regular issue. So again, my apologies. If you're watching these in order, technically this should have come before last week's episode. But I had forgotten about the annual, and then in between recording sessions, I was dealing with a cold and stuff like that. So when I decided it was time to record the next one here, I realized, I skipped right over the annual. So time to head back to that. So there we go. That was Spider-Man Annual number 1. I hope you enjoyed it. As I always say, thank you so much for supporting the channel. We've had a very slow but continuous growth. We're adding new subscribers all the time. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. Make sure to view. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up. Feel free to leave comments. My new friend Nick, who has his Marvel and blog, that he's left comments, and he's had put his link to his blog in when he's had topics that have crossed over with the things that I've talked about in the videos. Check it out. It's a really cool blog. He has a lot of really neat historical information, and I am looking forward to getting him on the channel here very soon. And we are going to talk all things Spidey and Steve Ditko and Marvel and art, and I'm really, really excited to do that. So we'll make an announcement, and that'll be a fun live stream. So if you see this video and you're interested in hearing more from another comic historian, keep your eyes open and check out that live stream when it hits. So thank you all. Appreciate your time, and we will see you again next week for more Art of Spider-Man retrospective video time. Thanks so much, everybody.